Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive, and it's time to see what's making the headlines with The Guardian's political editor, Pippa Crerar, and the political journalist and broadcaster, Theo Usherwood. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's have a look at what's on some of those front pages. The Eye quotes the consumer group Which, describing airlines which flew passengers into the Greek wildfire zones without the opportunity to rebook or to get a refund as irresponsible. The Metro focuses on one Brit, Jonathan Lewis, who used his holiday rental car to rescue a number of frightened families from the flames in Rhodes. The Express has this headline: Race to rescue Britons in Greek wildfires nightmare. The Mirror has more stories of people escaping the fires with the headline, We ran for our lives. The Times say 30,000 people are still trapped on holiday by these fires. The Guardian hears from scientists who say the link between the fires and climate change is undeniable. The Telegraph reports that the chairman of NatWest is under mounting pressure to find out what role the bank's chief executive played, if any, in the leaking of Nigel Farage's private financial information to the BBC. City AM invokes Monty Python to cover Twitter's much criticised rebrand, declaring this is an expert. The Financial Times reports that Credit Suisse has been fined hundreds of millions of dollars for failings over the collapse of a US investment company, which also led to the bank's own demise. And the Star ponders whether a spaceship might have crashed on Mars. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you're watching us. And we're joined tonight by Pippa Crerar and Theo Usherwood. Let's get going. Great to have you both with us. Pippa, I'll kick off with you first, if I may. The Daily Express sums up the wildfires quite well. Race to rescue Britons in Greek wildfires nightmare. 10,000 British citizens caught up in the fires.
Yeah, I mean, this has been this astonishing story that we've watched unfurl over the last 7 days. It's not uncommon for southern European countries to experience wildfires. In fact, I remember a few years ago driving through Montenegro and seeing the mountainside on fire not too far from us. But the scale of the fire in Rhodes has been really dramatic and alarming, not least for the tens of thousands of British tourists that are currently there or have been there. Before you even get to the impact that it will have had on the homes and livelihoods of the Greek people themselves. The Greek economy is obviously incredibly reliant on tourism. I think it's about 25% of its GDP comes from tourism. So the country is absolutely prioritising, making sure that people know that human life comes first. If you remember, there was an awful story of a fire raging through a resort in Greece about 5 years ago, a resort called Mati, where 100 people died in their homes and their cars. And the Greeks will be absolutely really determined to make sure that they don't have any repeat of loss of life, as happened so tragically then. But it seems to have been a very, as well as dramatic, a rather chaotic evacuation process, with people ending up waiting for hours on beaches. Eventually, the Greek Navy coming in, but before that, sort of flotilla of small boats trying to take people from the south of Ireland and move them to the north. People sleeping on the airport floors, flights coming in even while others were attempting to get home and be repatriated to Britain. And the Greek Prime Minister has said that they're at war with fire, that the next few days are going to be crucial with high temperatures continuing. But it doesn't look like they've got the situation under control yet. And that obviously is very worrying for people, not just who are there, but people who have loved ones who are out there on holiday and trying to get home.
Yeah, and as Pippa has been discussing, Theo, of course, there are so many issues to discuss here when it comes to what the residents of some of these islands are going through, climate change. But of course, the main story dominating most of the front pages tomorrow is this scramble to escape for so many tourists who, when you read the accounts, have been through some rather terrifying ordeals.
Yes, and just to underscore what Pippa was saying, if you look at the front page, there's an article on the front page of the Daily Telegraph where Alicia Kearns, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, is asking the government, saying the government needs to introduce more tighter guidance so that people know that they shouldn't be travelling to the region because of the risks of wildfires. And as people were saying, which the consumer group, and this was reported on the front of the Eye, has described as irresponsible the actions of some of the tourist operators flying people in at the very same time as actually there's been an effort to get people out of the region, and of course for the Greek people and the Greek economy and the reliance that the Greek economy has on tourism, what it means not just this year, because people are obviously not going to be, if people are being evacuated from the country, they're not going to be staying there for holidays and spending their money, but what it means in future years if because of climate change, this part of Europe just becomes somewhere that just you can't rely on as a holiday destination because of the risk of very severe heat, and then, of course, as a result, significant wildfires that can put your family and yourself in danger in the way that we've seen, and the scenes we've seen, the stories told on the front page of the papers and across the broadcasters over the last 48 hours or so.
Yeah, Pippa, as Theo was describing there, the front page of the Eye calling some of these airlines irresponsible for continuing to fly passengers to some of these areas at the moment. But it raises big questions, doesn't it, in terms of insurance, what people are covered for. Many of these people booked their holidays a long time ago and wouldn't have known that these would be the circumstances. And until the FCO, until the Foreign and Commonwealth Office changes its travel advice, for many people that they're not even entitled to a refund.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, for many people, not all. And number 10 was at pains today to point out that it's not, the insurance doesn't depend necessarily on FCDO travel advice, but for the vast majority of people with policies, unless the FCDO suggests that people don't go to Rhodes, then it's on them if they cancel and therefore won't be getting refunds. And there doesn't seem to be any sort of mitigation measures put in place by either insurers or indeed by the tour companies. If you read your travel insurance, there's always small print that says that there are certain acts of God, wildfires presumably are one of them, given the high temperatures, that aren't covered. And for many people, this will be thousands of pounds worth of holidays that often they've been saving up for and looking forward to. And there won't be any insurance forthcoming. And there was some suggestion earlier today at Westminster that the FCDO might update their guidance, but we've all been sort of refreshing the page regularly, and they haven't yet. They will be obviously keeping a very close eye on it. The situation in Corfu, another Greek island, apparently, although alarming last night, there was a couple of thousand people that were evacuated. They apparently had that under control now. According to the local politicians, but it's Rhodes really, I think, which is most alarming for people, and particularly when you look at the hottest temperatures Greece has had, hottest temperatures in 50 years apparently, hitting 45 degrees in an area called Thessaly. And of course, with those high temperatures comes hot, dry winds, which are basically superfood for fires. And it is one of the reasons why they've spread so fast. But tour guides, tour operators, even though Downing Street and the government is saying that in the first instance people should speak to their tour companies, as the front page of the Eye suggests, they haven't necessarily been behaving in the way that you might expect, with flights going out even on Saturday night when it was quite clear that actually it was a very difficult and indeed dangerous situation in large swathes of Rhodes, and the knock-on effect of that was people fled and sort of were put up in sports halls and other hotel lobbies in other resorts, in the Greek people, helped a lot of people, took a lot of people, tourists, into their own homes, and obviously on the airport floor itself. And yet the tour operators seem to think that it was okay to keep sending people out there. Now you'd think that some of the big operators would have very senior teams of people sitting down and working at actually first and foremost whether this is a safe and responsible thing to do, and which the consumer group here says that they concluded that it absolutely wasn't. So I think there'll be answers as this situation gets under control. There'll be questions as the situation gets under control, and people demanding answers as to what decisions the tour operators made and whether they were the right ones or not.
Yeah, certainly lots of big consumer questions to answer, as you say, and Theo, lots of climate questions to answer as well. Pippa's paper, the front page of The Guardian, leading on this tomorrow, that the climate crisis is linked to the heat waves and these fires, scientists calling that link undeniable.
Yes, the front page of The Guardian leading on that report by a group of scientists, which it says there's an inextricable link between climate change and what we're seeing in Europe. And of course, this is a story that's been previously told in Australia during it was 18 months ago or so. We had those extraordinary wildfires in Australia, and there was debate amongst the politicians about what was the reason for it, and climate change again top of the list. I mean, here in the UK, it's possible to look out of the window and see the rain and the wind and say, what climate change? And of course, you only have to, now it's getting closer and closer to our front door, if you like, in what we're seeing in southern Europe. This heat wave is by and large unprecedented, record temperatures in Greece, and we've seen those temperatures out in Italy and in Spain as well. The scientists have come to the conclusion, and it's impossible to see any other conclusion, that the reason for this is that is global warming and climate change, and that something has to be done. And of course, we've had numerous COP meetings, but there's going to be mounting pressure, I'd have thought, in London, Westminster, and across Europe for more action to be taken to try and mitigate against the rising temperatures, because of course it has, as we were talking about previously, a huge knock-on impact on the economy in Greece.
Let's have a look at a few more of the front pages. Pippa, let's have a look at the Daily Telegraph to start with. Really interesting story about the Nigel Farage fallout with Coutts Bank. Of course, the BBC has apologised today, as many people will be aware, for an inaccurate story that claimed Coutts had shut down Mr Farage's account because he didn't meet the financial requirements. And there's now pressure to find out whether some of that information may have been leaked from the very top.
Yes, this all stems from this story. A couple of weeks ago, Nigel Farage announced that his bank account with Coutts had been shut down without any explanation. And there was a story initially that suggested by Simon Jack, the BBC's very well-connected business editor, that was because he didn't meet the financial requirements that were necessary for a bank like Coutts. I think it was something like needing £1 million in his accounts, which obviously not many people reach that threshold. But then it turned out that that account was wrong, and the BBC corrected it. And in fact, he had his account shut down because Coutts believed that he did not align with their values, that he had different values to the bank. And what's happened subsequently is that it turns out that the night before Simon Jack wrote the initial story, he was sat next to Dame Alison Rose, who's the chief executive of NatWest, which owns Coutts, or of which Coutts is part, at a charity dinner. Now, nobody is, I don't think, obviously, I think any journalist would rightly refuse to reveal their sources. And all the BBC has said is that he had very trusted senior sources. But it does shine the spotlight on her and what she knew and whether or not she said anything. And Howard Davies, the chairman of NatWest, is now under pressure to hold a board-level internal inquiry. Nigel Farage has written to him. And of course, NatWest is almost 40% owned by the taxpayer. So the government obviously has also got involved, and Rishi Sunak at Prime Minister's question last week, and other senior politicians since have obviously expressed their own concerns about any politician or any individual being having their account shut down because of their political views, whatever side of the fence they may be on. So it's a bit of a, it's a internal row which has exploded externally. And Howard Davies is now in a position where he's going to have to answer to the board and answer to Nigel Farage, which obviously is going to be pretty uncomfortable for the bank. So, all eyes on that to see what they decide, if anything, to do.
Yeah, certainly. It's a story that has raised a lot of ethical questions and questions when it comes to privacy. Let's move on to the front page of City AM, Theo. An interesting story, of course, that is being covered today about the rebranding of Twitter. I must say I missed the Bluebird already.
Yes, it's been rebranded as X, and the members of staff who work for Twitter are going to be known as Xers. I just don't quite know what political journalists or anybody who broadcasters or MPs or anybody who tweets, I don't know what we're supposed to be doing now if we're not tweeting. How do we describe the process of going on to Twitter, or X as it is? It's one of those, you could see that Elon Musk had from the very outset that he had huge plans for when he took over Twitter in this, what was it, $44 billion takeover. But it does seem that from the outside, at least, or maybe from a user's point of view, even, that I'm slightly at a loss as to what we're now meant to be describing ourselves as when we go onto this website to give our views, our news, our opinions, whatever it might be. I thought the tweet, the Larry the Bird, and the name and the whole process of the website was, or the app was sort of integral to its existence. But obviously, Elon Musk has different ideas, and there's talk of it turning into a much broader platform where people will find it easier to share video and other content, and not just tweeting whatever they want to be tweeting about at any given time. But I'm slightly at a loss now as to how I describe how I tell my wife what I'm doing when I'm going on this website called X. I'm slightly lost as to what the process is now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can't call it a tweet now there's not a bird, but I'm not sure X's is really going to catch on. Pippa, Theo, thanks so much. We'll see you again next